I wrecked the bike. It is totaled and gone. Luckily, I was just scraped up. I did not get to ride Route 66 with my buddies. That will have to be a trip for another time. Now, with all that out of the way, I will tell you what happened. But before that, I should tell you some background. I was raised by a mechanical engineer who imbued in me a fascination with all things mechanical. I purchased my first car at 15, spent 2.5 years undertaking a complete nut and bolt restoration. Throughout my life, I have had a very eclectic assortment of mechanical things to satisfy my inner tinker. Now, I was also raised by a nurse who had worked in emergency rooms. Based on my mother's nursing experience, she had a prohibition on fireworks. Skateboards were out too, but the item that topped the banned list above all was motorcycles. No child of hers would have a motorcycle as long as they lived under her roof. Fine, I said, I'll get one when I go to college. Or as long as I'm supporting you. Damn it. This was a relatively clever rule. I left for college and never moved back home, working at school every summer, and after I graduated, I had to fund real expenses like rent and food all year round, so a motorcycle was not really obtainable by me. Fast forward a few years, and I had an opportunity to pick up a couple of non-running Hondas, maybe a 175 and a 650. I have no recollection of the year or model. I ended up getting one or both of them running, rode them briefly, and then flipped them over to a buddy of mine. I decided I better take a motorcycle operator's class, and I did. I got the endorsement on my license and fully expected I would have another motorcycle in no time. I love to hear stories about buddies riding or their friends or relatives riding motorcycles. One of the most indelible stories was a friend in college who took the summer off to do a long ride. He had an old Kawasaki and they planned to ride from Chicago to LA on Route 66. That sounded epic. Summer started and away they went. Finally, at the end of the summer, they showed back up. Where the heck were you guys? He said, we were having so much fun. When we got to LA, we decided to keep going. We rode the Pacific Coast Highway north, rode all the way to Alaska. Once we got to Anchorage, we turned around and headed home to Chicago. Besides oil changes, we had zero mechanical issues until we got back to Lakeshore Drive about a mile from home when the chain on the Kawasaki broke. That was the kind of trip I dreamt about. Fast forward again a few years, let's say 25 or so. I accumulated a number of car projects to keep me occupied, but never a motorcycle. Then about 2 years ago, I take the plunge again and pick up 4 little Honda motorcycles from the mid-60s, 3 first-generation Honda Cubs and 1 first-generation CT90. You can see some of those videos here on my channel, and I've got more coming because I've got 4 of them now. After hearing about this purchase, my buddies immediately started lobbying me to join them on motorcycle rides. Hey, you should get this bike, you could get that bike, you should ride with us. Then came the zinger. We're going to go ride Route 66 on our motorcycles, you should ride with us. Oh man, how can I make this trip happen? They were planning on the late summer or early fall of 2023. How could I do that? I needed a bike. A Honda Cub at 35 miles an hour was not going to cut it. I kept thinking back to a buddy of mine in the mid-90s whose father cruised the whole country for years on a Honda Goldwing. Comfort and capacity, a couch on wheels, reliable. That had to be the choice. But which Goldwing? I am, above all else, cheap when I buy my projects. I will spend money on tools because tools are free. Meaning once you purchase a tool, you own it and you will have it for the next time, making the next repair free. But I am cheap when it comes to purchasing projects. My price point was low, like $1,000, because whatever you buy needs to have the basic preventative maintenance done anyway, and you're always got to sort out these projects. Plus, becoming familiar with the platform before a ride was critical, so I didn't mind having to do some repairs. A modern Goldwing 1800 was out of the question. They were way too expensive. A 1500 seemed perfect, but good ones were more than I really wanted to spend. The older 1200s were cheap. I mean, I could get those for like $300 to $500, but they all look like basket cases. Some parts looked challenging to obtain, and being unfamiliar with the platform, I needed something very close to stock to figure out what was and wasn't working, what should and shouldn't be there, what kind of modifications the previous owner had made. So I settled on a 1500 was the bike for me. On to the hunt. And I think I got lucky. However, I live on the East Coast. Because of salt on the roads in the winter, we have rust. It's a fact of life for us. I found a 94 GL1500 Goldwing Aspen Kate on Facebook Marketplace, located outside Atlantic City, about 180 miles away. It had not run in a few years, looked a little crusty. My buddies were so excited that with 1 hour notice, they scrapped their plans and they were in the truck with me going to pick it up. That was when the GL1500 videos started. I picked up the bike on May 13th, 2023. The Route 66 ride was going to be the end of August or the beginning of September. We still had to work out the logistics. The bike was not running, and I had little time to get it sorted so I could get some time in the saddle before Route 66. I knew the bike had not been running for a few years, and the previous owner bought it in that condition about a year earlier. He did not have the money to get it sorted. We agreed on $1,000, and I went to get it based on the 3 pictures and his representation that it was complete. Here's a picture of it after we pushed it up on the trailer for the ride home. I got a bin of parts. It looked like everything was there. The oil looked clean. The tires were 20 years old. The previous owner had told me he paid somebody to have the gas tank drained. If you want to see more, watch the initial assessment video that's linked here, and you can see how this shook out. My primary goal was for it to be dependable and reliable. I set out to assess the current condition, drain and change all the fluids, and see what it needed. I replaced the fuel pump and did the primary tune-up items, flushed the brakes, replaced the tires, replaced the shifter shaft seal, installed a shifter support bracket. All of that was pretty straightforward, and I've got videos that show everything that I did. The big job was the clutch hydraulics. If you look at my videos, you see I was not thorough when I rebuilt the clutch master cylinder the first time, and it caused me to decide to replace the clutch line, but in the end, I don't think that was a problem. But since I couldn't find a video showing how to replace the clutch line, I posted it anyway. In the end, I screwed up when I was rebuilding the master cylinder and had to do it again. I repainted the rusty belly tins, replaced the torn boot on the air suspension, and I was ready for the road. Now, in fairness, I had never ridden a motorcycle this big, and I knew I would have to ease into it. The very first ride on the bike by one of my buddies who has years of experience was just to make sure it worked like it should. My first ride was about 2 miles long, and I didn't even have the exhaust manifold on it. The second ride was about 12 miles long, and after my first attempt rebuilding the clutch, I got 6 miles away from the house, and the clutch gave out. You can watch my clutch success and failure videos where I describe how I nursed it home if you want. The next ride was on a fully sorted bike, the first big shakeout ride. This was Saturday, July 1st, 2023. Remarkably quick from when I purchased the bike. I met a buddy of mine at Cycle Gear. I bought some of the much-needed gear I had, and off we went. We rode for about 3 hours and did about 100 miles in total. I did go through a very small roundabout as a surprise, and easily I was able to toss the bike from one lean to the other going around the roundabout. The bike was running great. I felt comfortable, but I knew I needed to build up more time. 1 week later, on Saturday, July 8th, we planned another ride. The goal was to ride longer while also increasing the difficulty of the roads. In the week running up to this ride, one of my buddies had negotiated to purchase another motorcycle in Delaware, not too far from me, so we agreed to ride over and meet him when he picked up the bike, and then we were going to ride back. Saturday morning comes, and I'm off, just around 8 a.m. I gassed up at 8:30, messaged one of my buddies who was going to meet me at the bike shop in Annapolis at around 9 a.m. You can see the map of our ride here. Interestingly, while I'm at the gas station, I calculated my mileage. I had already covered a total of 131 miles on the bike. I had to fill up with 20 gallons of gas, so I was getting about 32.7 miles to the gallon at that point in time. Not too bad for a bike that had been off the road for a few years. Off to the cycle shop I went. Arrived there without incident. We spent a few minutes exchanging jabs with each other, checking out each other's bikes, and we were off to Delaware. The goal was to be there by 11, and it went great. We rode across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. For those who don't know, this is a high bridge that allows ocean-going container ships to pass below it, and it's really long. You can get pushed around by the wind when you're up top, but it all went really well. I felt comfortable. The bike was running great. Even the cruise control worked. We got there around 11. My buddy picked up the bike. We stopped for a couple of photos. Here's the three of us getting settled and talking about our new bikes before our ride. At this point, I had about 90 miles in, and I had planned on turning around and heading home. That would have been enough for me for this second big shakeout ride, but that's not what happened. One buddy suggested we go to lunch. I didn't need lunch, but I did want to have a riding buddy or two for the ride home, so off to lunch we went, about 10 miles further from my home. Unfortunately, this was not a quick lunch. We sat down at a diner for probably an hour. None of us had anything to drink, but we had a big lunch. Ugh. After lunch, one of my buddies wanted to chart out another 200-mile ride. I said, no way. You do 200 miles, I'm heading home. They agreed with me, and back home we went. Summer weather in the mid-Atlantic means thunderstorms, and this day was no different. We were cruising west, watching the storms approaching in front of us. And they hit. As you can see from this radar image, we got hammered. We pulled over, no cover anywhere near us. If you've never been to the eastern shore of Maryland, there are large stretches with nothing, and we were in one of them. I did not have the confidence to ride in the rain, nor did I have rain gear. My buddies busted out rain covers and rain gear, and I stood there in the rain getting soaked. This went on for about 20 minutes. The rain slacked up a bit, and I decided we had to get out of there. We got back on and kept heading west through the storm. Amazingly, the Goldwing was awesome in the rain. The rain rolled off the windscreen, and the air pocket that's created behind the windscreen and the fairings actually kept me dry in a perfect cocoon. Admittedly, I was already soaked, but the riding was fine. We made it about 10 more miles to the gas station, pulled over. Just as the rain was ending, we dried off for about a half an hour. I relaxed, calmed down, and I was ready to go home. What I didn't realize between the riding we had already done, the big sit-down lunch, the stress of the thunderstorms, and riding in the rain, I was getting pretty tired. We got rolling again, but now it was late afternoon, and another quirk of the eastern shore of Maryland is the Chesapeake Bay Bridge can get backed up with people going to the shore or returning. We landed squarely in the crush of people returning from the shore. We crawled along in stop-and-go traffic for an hour as we approached the bridge. Lumbering an 800-pound motorcycle at a crawl or starting and stopping, whichever decision you made, was exhausting. And don't forget, drivers use stop-and-go traffic as an excuse to change lanes without any warning, even if they think they can get one car advantage. The whole stretch was stressful and even more exhausting. We got across the bridge around 4 p.m., I needed to fuel up. I didn't know how much confidence I could place in the fuel gauge at this point in time, and running out of fuel was not my idea of fun. At the fuel up, I recorded that we had gone just over 156 miles that day on about 4.5 gallons of gas, or 34.7 miles to the gallon. Better than before, and I can report that I was mostly dry by now. Given the late hour, I had to head up to my in-laws rather than head home. Away we went. But now I was getting really tired. I just didn't realize it. About 30 minutes later, I was traveling westbound on Maryland Route 32 near the NSA. The road was clear and dry, even though we had rain only a couple of hours before. Traffic was light. I was in the left lane riding about 60 miles an hour. I could see ahead of me a couple of yellow and black Chevron highway signs indicating a bend to the right. I clearly saw the signs, and I began to think about them in my mind. Okay, I'm going to need to lean here. The reality is, this was the fastest I had been going into a turn this sharp. It wasn't that sharp, but at this speed, it was the fastest I had gone. An 800-pound motorcycle going at 60 miles an hour has a lot of inertia, and it wants to stay upright. As motorcycle riders, we usually rely on this phenomenon to have a smooth and steady ride. We use a push on the handlebar or lean of the bike to steer us around. I knew in my mind exactly what to do. Lean and accelerate. Accelerate through the turn. Don't slow down. Don't steer through the turn. Lean through the turn. I had been doing it all day. And when it came time to lean, I couldn't do it. I was too tired. I panicked. I applied a lot of brake. I watched the front tire get closer to the yellow line painted on the left side of the road because I was essentially going straight and the road was bending off to the right. I should have been looking where I wanted to go, not at the yellow line. I was braking even more now, exactly what I should not have been doing. The wheel touched the yellow line, then it crossed it, then I was riding on the grassy median, which sloped down to the left. I believed for a second that I was going to ride the bike to a stop on the grass. I was still braking, but grass is slick, and it had rained. The wheel slipped out to the left, and the bike went down on the right. I held onto the grips and rode the bike down. I slid the bike on its side for about 15 to 20 yards until the wheels hit the guardrail. The bike immediately stopped sliding forward and spun around on the ground 180 degrees back over front, stopping with the wheels now facing the road. When it spun, I was ejected about 5 feet or so. I came to a rest with my head under the guardrail laying on my back. By the grace of God, I was alive and basically fine. I had scrapes and bruises, but otherwise I was fine. I was mad at myself. I knew what to do and I couldn't do it. I rode the bike off the road because of inexperience and fatigue. I got up and sat on the guardrail. My buddies had been ahead of me and they saw the cloud of dust and turned around. Some good Samaritans stopped to check on me and call an ambulance. The medics checked me out and I passed all their tests. I sent them on their way. The bike was not rideable. The shifter arm for the heel-toe shifter had broken off, so I could not shift. Even if it had, almost every plastic part was cracked or broken. The windshield was shattered. The crash bar was bent, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. The bike was towed, and in the end, I totaled it. I'm sure it had a lot of valuable parts, but after the front wheel hit the guardrail, I was never going to try rebuilding it. I don't have the space to run a parts business. The bike is gone. My buddies called off the Route 66 trip for 2024, and they're waiting for me to get another bike to join them. We shall see. The Goldwing both contributed to and protected me in the accident. It was way too heavy a bike for me at that skill level, but it was such a heavy bike with great highway protection that it provided a safety cocoon for my soft landing. I was lucky. That's all I can say about that. As you look at this pictures, I'll confirm what you see me wearing is exactly what I was wearing when I was riding. No, that is not the appropriate gear. I had a good helmet and boots, but that was it. The pants and shirt were totally inadequate. I had bought the boots and helmet, but had not gotten protective upper and lower gear. If I had, I likely would not have had a scratch. I was lucky. That's all I can say about that.